from Georgia. Thank you both very much for joining me. Mr. Kingston, I'm going to start with you. How far is your party prepared to take this? Are you going to risk putting the country into default next week if you don't get what you want?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, we are the only party, the only team out here who has passed a proposal. Cut, cap, and balance is the only thing that's passed both bodies. I might also point out we are the only party that's passed a budget, period. The president's own budget failed 97-0 in the U.S. Senate. So if you're looking for adult leadership, you have to look at John Boehner and not the Senate either, because we are the House. That we are the party in the House that has been passing legislation and looking at alternatives. We'll have another proposal on the floor tomorrow. We hope to get some bipartisan votes for it.
Well, the president is threatening to veto that, so I'm going to put the same question to you then, Mr. Scott. Other countries, especially in Europe, are biting the bullet. They're making huge cuts, deeply unpopular cuts to solve their budget problems. Why can't your party go that far too and do the same thing to avert a crisis?
Well, the averting the crisis, there is no crisis other than the artificial crisis that's been manufactured on this debt ceiling. Debt ceiling has been increased dozens of times, almost annually over the last 50 years, and it's a perfunctory acknowledgement of money that's already spent. There's only a crisis because the Speaker of the House says he's going to blow up the economy if he doesn't get his way. I don't believe that responsible legislators will actually follow through on that threat if we can't come to an agreement. Now, the president has made a good faith effort to come to some accommodation, but it hasn't happened, and it won't happen by August 2nd. And so what we need to do is to fulfill our legislative responsibilities and just pass the debt ceiling increase and then get back to the budget discussion. October 1st, September 30th is the end of the fiscal year. If we don't finish things by then, they can shut down the government if they don't get their way. So they're not losing any leverage. But this artificial deadline to suggest that we have to come up with something and we have to satisfy the Speaker of the House, otherwise they'll blow up the economy, is just, I just don't think responsible legislators will follow through on that threat. And neither does the market. Markets haven't collapsed because they just expect common sense to prevail, and the debt ceiling will be extended.
Well, there is some optimism by the markets that you two will somehow reach an agreement. But, Mr. Kingston, the polls show that the majority of Americans actually hold your party responsible for this stalemate. Why won't you budge?
You know what's interesting is the president does seem to be focused on the Republican Party as opposed to being focused on jobs and his failed economic policies. He's the one who ran up the $3 trillion debt, in addition to what was already too much spending by George Bush, I might point out, as Republican. He's the one who took unemployment from 7.5% to nearly 10%. And people aren't working, they're not paying into the system. So yet, during that, he's still focused on the Republican Party. What I'd love to see as a Republican and as an American is a plan from the president, not speeches that alludes to a plan, but an actual plan, and have Harry Reid pass it. They can attach it to a House bill. It doesn't have to originate in the House, but we haven't seen the Senate pass a bill yet. Again, the Republican Party has passed the only compromise that's out there. It's cut, cap, and balance. The Senate has tabled it. They wouldn't even vote on it. Well, so that's irresponsibility.
Well, there are plenty of plans on the table, and some of them are strikingly similar. But, Mr. Scott, what do you think the rest of the world is making of this? I mean, you've got the head of the IMF saying that this isn't just about the U.S. economy, it's about the global economy. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm not going to sit up here and be lectured on fiscal responsibility by the other side of the aisle. I was elected in 1992 and 1993 when we came in. We passed the budget without any Republican help. In fact, they demagogued the budget and tried to dismantle it after the 95 election. And that budget balanced the budget, went into surplus, and if they hadn't messed it up when President Bush came in, we would have paid off the entire national debt held by the public about 3 years ago. We owe no money to anybody. Talk about plans, that's the plan. We need to come together and responsibly get a budget under the normal legislative process where you're making choices. These demands right now, we're trying to come up with $400 billion a year. We cut taxes last December, $400 billion a year, and now this discussion is how we're going to pay for it. Let's do it all at the same time. Maybe we should let some of those tax cuts expire rather than to cut Social Security and Medicare. That's the way you have a logical legislative process. But the crisis, the so-called crisis, is just totally manufactured.
Both of you, thank you very much, but I am going to have to let you get back to work now because our time is out. But thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now to Norway, where the lawyer